think about our gathering this morning in a combined worship, and then us moving next door for the Crossroads workshop that will follow our worship, those are the two prominent phrases that have been in my mind. Now, a few weeks ago, I shared with you how each week these pre-selected lectionary readings just seem to correspond with what is going on in my life and the life of the church on a consistent basis. And with such frequency, one would think that that awe factor would become kind of ho-hum and you just kind of expect it. And yet each week it is a wow that seems to hit me. Now I contribute this to the reality that God is still speaking. I want to share with you a few thoughts this morning on how the text that Bev just read to us, a text that is a letter to a young minister, is an encouragement not just to Timothy and to the congregation that he was serving, but also to us here at Port Orange United Church of Christ as well. Paul states, I recall your sincere faith that was alive first in your grandmother Lois, and then in your mother Eunice, and I am sure is in you. Because of this, I remind you to rekindle God's gift that you possess through the laying on of my hands. Timothy was a student of Paul's and was appointed by Paul to lead this congregation that Paul had planted. What strikes me in this segment is the connection that Paul makes about ancestors, and how both Paul and Timothy, in their faith, comes through their ancestral background, through the influences of their families. Paul has no shame in worshiping God of his ancestors, and Timothy is a third-generation product of faithfulness. The way of worshiping God for Paul was not in the same manner that he was taught. Paul has taken on his faith of his youth and has remolded it into his own being, I guess would be a good way to say that, because of what he had personally received from Jesus on his road to Damascus one day. Now, I say Jesus because Paul really never seems to point to God as giving him the message, but always refers to Jesus as that foundation for the words in which Paul speaks. From the very first encounter that Paul had with Jesus on that road to Damascus, Paul stays true to the understanding that his job was to spread the word of Jesus. Paul develops a new vision of Jesus' ministry as he expands his ministry to share this good news to the broader world, to the Gentile world, making it no longer just something for the Hebrew people. The text continues, for God did not give me a spirit of fear, but of power and love and self-control. One of the ways of rekindling one's spirit is by remembering and celebration. Now, we do this each year. We do it when Advent comes along and Christmas. We do it with Lent and with Easter. And we do it even within our families and anniversaries of weddings and birthdays and deaths and so on. Celebrations provide the space needed so that we can recall not just our past, but through that past, know who we are currently. And also gives us that opportunity to envision what we wish to become in the future. So I'm getting ready to show you a video, and it speaks about a perspective of one person and then the perspective of the next generation. And it does have writing on it, but I'm going to read it to you because it's a little difficult to see the screen. And actually, if somebody is able to slip behind and darken this front lighting, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Great. This will provide you to be able to see the screen better. Maybe it is. One day, the father of a very wealthy family took his son on a trip to the country to show him how poor people live. They spent a couple of days and nights on the farm that the rich farmer or father considered very poor. On their return from the trip, the father asked his son, "Did you see how the poor people live?" "Oh, yes," said the son. "So tell me, what did you learn from the trip?" asked the father. And the son answered, "I saw that we have one dog and that they have 3. And I saw that they have several horses and we have none. We have a pool that reaches to the middle of our garden, and they have a whole creek that has no end. We have imported lanterns in our garden, and they have the stars at night. Our patio reaches to the front yard, and they have a whole horizon. We have a small place upon land to live on, and they have fields that go beyond our sight. We have babysitters, and they spend time with their kids. We buy our food, but they grow theirs. We have walls around our property to protect us. They have friends to protect them. We go to piano concerts. They play their own concerts. The boy's father was speechless. Then his son added, "Thanks, Dad, for showing me how poor we are." Isn't perspective wonderful? I wanted to show you that video in part to help prepare our minds for what we're going to be doing after worship over in the Jim Reed room. Because perspective is in the eye of the beholder. Paul speaks of where Timothy's faith comes from. Timothy received his faith through the faith of his grandmother Lois and of his mother Eunice. I think many of us can point to our families of origin and say that is where the seeds of our faith have come from. And Kathy, I thought you were going to steal my sermon. Well, churches are those same types of seeds. We have those same types of seeds. Those who traveled before us, laying the foundation that any faith community is built upon. So I thought I would share with you just a few highlights about the foundations of our family of faith here at Port Orange. Now, I don't know if you recall Jackie Gaither, our matriarchal grandmother or our mother. But in reading a little about our history, I discovered that Jackie is attributed to calling up in the late 1970s the Conference Office of Florida, and Kathy, evidently your father was involved in that as well, which wasn't written down, so I apologize for not mentioning him. But I discovered that Jackie had made this phone call asking if a group of folks could start a new church, a UCC church in Port Orange. So by 1979, Reverend Don Youngclass was called as the founding pastor of this married band of Christians. Now, for those of you who want another connection and aren't aware of this, he happens to be the uncle of Jana. Oh my gosh. Thank you. And the anniversary, let's see here, where am I at? The anniversary of our first worship is November 24th, 1979, meeting in the Port Orange Youth Center with about 35 people. The first members of our family came together through newspaper advertising, through referrals from other pastors, and most importantly, a lot of pre-work provided by Reverend James Reed. And again, I don't know who Jackie and Jim might be compared to, but they are certainly two examples of a Lois and of a Eunice. So in the winter of 1980, the covenants were written, and on February 24th, 1980, 31 people signed and became charter members of this family of faith. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of those 31 or 35 people are in the worship this morning? 1, 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
2.
Okay, not quite as many as I thought. The first service was held in this building on November 21st of 1982 with around 175 people present. Now, one of the very beginning ministries that this church had went beyond the community of Port Orange. We were getting ready to, they hired an architect to design the building. $300,000 was the initial cost on that building. And the national denomination says, you know, that's just a little too much money for us to give to you guys. So the conference minister suggested an out-of-the-box thinking mode and says, what about if we get this architect to create a basic startup building that can be used nationwide? This building is the prototype that was used in the 1980s and 1990s for new church startups across the country. You will find this basic building in a lot of places. Our first nationwide piece of ministry. As I was uplifted in learning about our congregation's ancestors, my heart was also saddened as I continued to read and found that within 5 years of the establishment of this congregation, we lost one of our visionaries with the death of Jim Reed. Today, after worship, we as a family will gather into the Jim Reed Fellowship Hall to continue in that vision of our early ancestors. We will do this in the spirit that the Apostle Paul states in verse 9. Relying on the power of God, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and grace. We are not stand-alone congregation. We are the heirs of a vision that began not just in the late 70s, but a vision that dates back to Abraham and Sarah, calling for justice and for restoration in the name of God, the creator of all life. Amen.
Amen.